Hello and welcome back to Over My Dead Pod. I'm your host, Holly Spear.
This is Kate Carter.
And I'm Kylie Cola.
So I just sent the girls the case that we're doing today. Have you guys heard of it?
No idea.
I am not.
Okay, so there is a reason for that, and I'll explain that a little bit later in the episode. But this is the case of the Alaskan serial killer, otherwise known as the Butcher Baker.
I'm down for this. This is gonna be weird.
Is there cannibalism? Wait, don't tell me.
No.
Okay, good.
Okay,
No.
okay.
Trigger warning for cannibalism. So in 1983, a woman was kidnapped and driven to a remote location in Alaska. The woman would escape her captor and run naked and chained down the highway. This would spur a massive investigation into an Alaskan serial killer that hunted his victims in the Alaskan wilderness like game. This is the story of Robert Hansen, the Alaskan serial killer. Today, obviously, we're in Alaska and it's the 80s. And during this time, there's an increase in men moving to Alaska to work in the oil fields. So there's an increase in young single men, and the amount of men is now outnumbered by the population of women. And hand in hand, as you might be able to guess, this resulted in an increase in sex work services. Many young women looking to make a living were recruited to perform sex work in Anchorage. And prostitution was illegal there at the time and still is, but police at this time were kind of soft on the law when it came to prostitution. On June 13th, 1983, Officer Baker and Officer Vance got a call to go and investigate a scene happening on Fifth Avenue. It was 3 a.m., and there was a report that there was a young woman running down the road, handcuffed and naked. The officers were told that the woman was now at the Grand Timber Hotel. A man was driving down the road when he passed this woman, naked and handcuffed, running and screaming, and saw a man chasing behind her. The man brought his car to a screeching halt and picked the woman up. She climbed into the truck and pled with the driver to take her to the Big Timber Motel. Now, the driver's a little taken back, kind of expecting the woman to want to go to the police station, but the woman begs to go to the motel. And as it would turn out, this woman is a sex worker and is living at the motel with her pimp, and she wants help from her pimp. And I don't know what the woman's relationship is with her pimp, but I think that whatever this woman has been through, it's probably normal for her to just want to see a familiar face. So the driver complies and reluctantly drops her off at the hotel. But then right after, the driver himself goes directly to the police station to report what just happened. So this is where we are in the story, and the officers are now on their way to this motel to talk to the woman and get her story. When the police arrive, they find the woman to be Cindy Paulson, a 17-year-old sex worker. She's still in handcuffs when they arrive. Police use a master key to free her from the cuffs. After this, Cindy feels a bit more comfortable to start telling police everything. And I mean everything. Cindy remembers every tiny little detail of her terrible, nightmarish night. Cindy explains that night around midnight, she was standing on a street corner in downtown Anchorage waiting for business when a man pulled up and offered her $200 for a night. This was much more than the going rate at the time, and Cindy found it a bit suspicious, but the man was nice and welcoming. He seemed shy and quiet. He looked pretty average. And unfortunately, Cindy disregarded her suspicion and got in the car. The man began to drive to a nearby parking lot where he shuts off the engine. The two are kind of flirting when all of a sudden, this guy grabs the back of Cindy's head by her hair. He jerks her head backwards and shoves the barrel of a gun between her eyes. The man tells her that if she listens to him, she will live. Obviously, Cindy obeys. Cindy sits in silence while the man drives her to a blue house close to where he parked. He grabs Cindy and drags her inside. Cindy's drugged down a set of stairs into a dark basement. The basement has a couch, a pool table, and animal head trophies hung up all over the walls. So kind of like a man cave. There in the basement, the man assaults Cindy. After assaulting her, he pulls out chains and wraps the chains around Cindy's neck and chains her to a support beam that's in the basement and handcuffs her hands. The man then lays down on the couch and sleeps for about 4 to 5 hours. Cindy lays there thinking, wondering if she will be killed. The man finally wakes up. He allows Cindy to actually get dressed and use the bathroom. Then the man says, "Before I let you go, there's one more place I want to take you. I want you to see my cabin, just really quick, and then I'll bring you back and let you go."
No, thank you.
The man tells Cindy that the only way they can get to the cabin is by air, and he has a plane. So she needs to get into his plane. So the man loads Cindy up in the car and drives them to a private airfield where he starts to load the plane and get it ready. There is no way in hell that Cindy is getting into that plane. She knows that the moment she gets into this plane, she's never coming home. She knows that this is her only chance. Cindy watches as the man turns his back. He's loading stuff up in his plane, and she makes a run for it. She starts sprinting towards the highway. She's sprinting with her handcuffs still on, and she's half naked and barefoot. She looks back, and the man is chasing her. She gets closer and closer to the highway. A truck is passing at the exact moment, and Cindy is waving her arms around in the air, screaming for help, screaming for her life. This is when she's picked up by a driver that reported the incident. So the same driver that we hear about that dropped her off at the hotel. When the police question her, not only is Cindy able to describe the story and exactly what happened to her, but Cindy is able to recall everything about the man, his house, his car, his plane, everything in excruciatingly vivid detail. She can describe the man down to his acne scars and crooked teeth, his house, which was a ranch style with caribou antlers above the garage and a bearskin rug laid across the floor, his car, what it looked like inside and out, down to the candy wrappers that were in the seat, and his plane. She even took the officers right to the airfield. At the airfield, Cindy sees the plane taking off and she screams, "That's him." Police get on the radio and obviously demand that the plane land. Once the plane lands, I think Cindy is able to rule out this being the man that assaulted her because she remembers exactly what he looks like. And as it turns out, this is not the right man. But in the process of all of this, an airfield security guard approached them and told them that there was a man at the airstrip previously that sounded like who they were looking for. The security guard gave the police the man's license plate and his plane's tail number. In the meantime, Cindy is taken to the hospital for an exam and a rape kit. The exam comes back that there are traces of male DNA found in her body, and there are clear signs of assault. There are also cuts and bruises on her wrists from where the handcuffs were. Police track down the tail number and license and find out that they are both registered to a man named Robert Hansen. Robert owned a pretty popular bakery in town, and he was pretty popular himself. He was very well respected in the community. He was born February 15th, 1939 in Iowa, and Robert's father had immigrated from Denmark and worked at a bakery. And the family lived in California near San Francisco for a while, but then it moved back home to Iowa and settled there. This is where his father opened up his own bakery that became pretty popular. Robert worked there at the bakery with his father. Police showed up at Robert's home, and he happily allows them to search. Everything in Robert's home matches exactly to a T what Cindy had described. The antlers, the support beam, the style, the color of the house, everything. Police are just kind of doing a sweep to see if they see anything directly related to Cindy, like her clothes or the handcuffs or things that would suggest a kidnapping. Police don't find anything that immediately ties them to Cindy, but they ask Robert to go ahead and come in and answer a few questions. Robert happily agrees to go in for questioning. Of course, Robert tells the police that he doesn't know Cindy and has nothing to do with any of this. In fact, Robert says that he has an alibi for the day that Cindy is claiming this happened. Robert explains that he was with his friends. He says the first part of the day he was with one friend. They spent the first half of the day working on a seat for his airplane. Then he went to a different friend's house where they had beers and planned a fishing trip that they were going on. He said that he was there the rest of the day, and then the two had gone to the airfield to install this plane seat that night. So Robert actually has two different friends that he claims he was with all day. But police are not about to just take his word for it. They call in the two friends, and both of those two friends confirm with police that they were with Robert both parts of the day.
I have a question too. If any of us were in trouble, would you automatically give an alibi?
I don't think I can answer that question.
I know. Legally, nod yes or no. Okay, just making sure we're all on this page.
I think I would be so nervous. I'd be worried that like Kate, if you got arrested and you're like, oh, I was with Kylie at the mall from like 2 to 5, the police would call me and be like, you guys were at like a coffee shop from 2 to 5, right? And I'd say yes, like thinking they were like, tricking me or something.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
true. That's so true. Guys, you have to like tell the people ahead of time. So like if I was like, you guys, I need you to help me with this alibi just in case shit goes down, that we did this on this day, like,
Yeah. 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 We'd have to definitely coordinate beforehand.
yeah.
Definitely.
We'll do that off air.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Recording stopped. Okay.
Yeah.
The police perform a background search of Robert and it actually comes back clean. Police end up letting Robert go since his background was clean, and police say that they didn't believe a married man with kids and a good business would commit this kind of crime. Okay. So they let him go because he's a good guy, which we know a lot of good guy serial killers that have kids and families, but whatever.
Disregard her like entire statement that perfectly described everything that matches him. But okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember that Cindy is a prostitute and Robert is a well-known businessman in the community. So they take Robert's word for it. They pick Robert, obviously.
I totally forgot for a second that she was a prostitute because we know from most all of our stories that regard prostitutes that the police do not give them much credibility.
No. So this was probably pretty unsurprising, but they let him go. Despite all this, and like we just said, I don't know if this will be surprising to you or not, but some police officers do not even believe Cindy. It's not that the officers don't believe that Sydney was in the house because she's able to describe everything in such excruciating detail, but they believe that it was a consensual relationship and maybe like she just didn't get paid and she's trying to go back and say that she was assaulted. So they just are taking Robert's word for it, but they don't believe that she was actually held against her will.
Holly, what year was this again?
1983.
Okay. That also is a big part.
Yeah. So police end up letting Robert go. This is even more surprising. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised at this point, but the officers want Cindy to come back to the police station and they want to give her a polygraph, not Robert. They want to give Cindy a polygraph, which is just freaking ridiculous. But whatever. They're treating her like the offender. Remember, Cindy was found on the side of the road chasing cars, handcuffed and naked, but okay.
She's just being dramatic.
Yeah. Yeah, she was very dramatic. Very unfortunately, police do not see anything wrong with this, and they contact Cindy trying to get her to come back to the station. Police find out that Sydney is gone. Cindy and her pimp both left town after reporting the incident. And this is not very surprising. They're both afraid that police will target them since prostitution is illegal. And because Cindy is under 18, she's actually 17 years old. So they kind of get the heck out of Dodge after reporting the incident.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
So she reports it, and then her and her pimp leave. With no physical evidence and Cindy disappearing and Robert having an alibi, the district attorney decided not to pursue a case against Robert.
Did she just disappear?
Maybe the pimp got scared that she contacted the police and assumed they were both going to get arrested. So he's like, okay, we got to go on the run.
Okay. I immediately think the opposite. I'm like, she did. She went to the police. They didn't believe her. He went and found her.
Oh God, I hope not. We'll see.
I mean, I hope not, but we are on a murder podcast.
So, although the Anchorage Police Department and the DA does not pursue charges, there are still some people in the department that do believe Cindy and do believe that she was assaulted. So they end up sending the file to the Alaska State Troopers who are working on an investigation of a series of murders occurring in Anchorage. So these murders are all women, mainly sex workers. Sex workers, escorts, they were going missing all over Alaska at this time. As we know, murders or disappearances like this are very hard to investigate and are not given very much attention. This is obviously because sex workers are kind of transient. They move around a lot. A lot of times they might be estranged from family or friends, and their families didn't know where they lived. Also, prostitution is illegal, like I said, so they kind of kept their lives secretive. Some of them were into drugs. Some of them were not. So when these prostitutes went missing, it was really hard for police to track where these girls could be or whether they went missing or not. And we know that this still occurs today. So the Anchorage PD gets a hold of this file and they actually recognize Robert's name because Robert is actually already on a short list of names that police are looking at for these disappearances.
Wouldn't this have been brought up at the very beginning?
Okay, so get this. When the background check on Robert was done back at Anchorage, the Anchorage Police Department was going through a computer switch, like upgrading all of their computers and software, and not all of the records were complete. So when they looked up Robert earlier, it showed that there was no crimes under his name. His record was clean. Like they searched his name, nothing comes up, they let him go. But when police receive a background check that they ordered from state capitol, it turns out that they were very wrong about his record. Police find out that Robert definitely did have a record, a big record.
Name it.
He's not an honest man with children.
Yeah, even though he has kids and a business, he's not a good man. Very shocking. So let's dive into Robert's very extensive record. So we're just going to start back at the beginning of Robert's life to describe some of this. So Robert struggled in school. He worked at his father's bakery sometimes until 2 a.m. His father was really hard on him. He would get mad at Robert over small mistakes. And when Robert was a child, he would fall asleep in school because he was working such long hours. This began to affect Robert's grades, and Robert also had severe acne as a kid, which left his face scarred. Robert also had a stutter that would get worse when he got nervous or embarrassed. So when he talked to people, he would stutter and have to stop talking altogether. So he would be in a conversation and then just have to stop talking and leave. All these factors made Robert a target of bullying by kids at his school. And Robert started to withdraw from all social settings. The only things that Robert really did enjoy were hunting and fishing. These were things that he could do alone. He didn't have to have friends to do them. So he kind of just got really into that. When Robert finished high school, he just kept working at his father's bakery until he joined the Army Reserves. He still worked at the bakery on and off and began dating a girl and teaching classes at the city police department. So it seemed like Robert's life was starting to look up. And that was until December 7th, 1960, when there was a fire at the Iowa bus barn. Buses and equipment from the school district were completely destroyed, and the fire department investigated and determined that the fire was intentionally set. It would be discovered that Robert Hansen had burned it down. Robert and a friend that worked at the bakery took gasoline and started the fire in the building. Also at this time, Robert was a volunteer firefighter. So Robert actually started the fire, then changed into his firefighting uniform and fought the fire that he started.
Smart. That's really smart.
Yeah.
Well, no, not smart. Don't do it.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to get tricky.
Well, he didn't trick very many people because he did get charged with this. But I mean, I say all that about his background and him doing bad in school, blah, 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 because this was his school that he used to go to. So he started the fire at his own school, basically, for revenge, because he's scorned, he's been made fun of, and he is kind of now an adult that has got issues. So he got caught because the accomplice ended up telling someone that they had started the fire, and that guy went and told the police. Robert was charged with arson, and then he was released on bail. Robert's girlfriend and most of the town actually believed that Robert was innocent and that he did not set the fire. People in the community knew and liked Robert and liked his family. Robert and his girlfriend got married after he made bail. However, Robert would end up going to court over the arson, and at trial, the other accomplice testified against Robert, and another man testified against Robert, who Robert had solicited to help him burn the building, and the guy said no, so he went to the other guy. So he has two people testifying against him at trial. Robert ends up pleading guilty, but maintains that he's being framed. He was sentenced to 3 years in a reformatory, and Robert would end up actually confessing, and after Robert confesses, his first wife divorced him.
Oh, that's rough.
After serving 23 months, Robert was paroled. Robert would also pick up some theft charges. He stole a chainsaw from a hardware store, which he pleaded guilty to, and he claimed that he was suffering from some kind of mental illness and needed psychiatric treatment. Sounds like he's kind of stealing stuff that he doesn't necessarily need or could probably pay for, but he's doing it for the thrill or the fun of it. I don't know. But for this offense, Robert served a year in prison and received psychiatric treatment.
Did it go in at all at what kind of psych treatment he got? If
No.
the criminal is saying like, hey, I need to be psych evaluated too, like, and he's doing petty, stupid thefts,
Mm-hmm.
I think like they would really look into that.
Yeah.
You would think.
Yeah, it doesn't say what kind of treatment he received or if it was enough, but I know that he did ask for it when he was serving for theft. And there were some other theft things that he picked up as well.
So this was like so long ago. They might not have had like a concrete diagnosis or known what it was. They're just like, oh, he's just a bad kid.
Yeah. Yeah. So after he gets out of prison, Robert moves in with his parents, who at that time had moved to Minnesota. This is where he met Darla Hendrickson, and they began dating in 1963. Soon, Robert would get a job in North Dakota, so the two got married and moved there together. Not long after, the couple moved again when Robert got a job in Minneapolis at another bakery. Robert didn't stay out of trouble long because he caught another theft charge for stealing from random stores in Minneapolis. The couple then moved to Anchorage, Alaska, where Robert worked decorating cakes and Darla got a job teaching. Darla and Robert would have their first child soon after moving. In Robert's police report, police find that he had attacked another young woman named Susie. October 15th, 1971, Robert saw a girl in a car that he thought was attractive. So, being how he is, Robert just decided to follow her home. Robert followed her all the way back, and Susie didn't notice. She gets out of her car, she goes into her house, and she's about to get in the shower when she hears a knock at the door. She throws a towel around her and goes and checks. It was Robert Hansen. Robert asked Susie if he could come inside and use her phone book, and she lets him. Robert stalled and flipped through the phone book and said he couldn't find what he was looking for. But before he left, he asked Susie if he could take her out on a date, because that's the perfect time. Susie told him no, that she was engaged. 2 days later, Susie pulls up to her apartment complex. She gets out of her car, and right as she did, Robert jumped out and pulled a gun on her. He told Susie not to scream, but Susie screamed anyway, at the top of her lungs, so loud that Susie's roommate heard her and called the police. Robert held Susie at gunpoint and tried to abduct her. He put the gun to her back and tried to force her in the back of his car. But before he could take off, the police arrived and blocked him in. Robert fled on foot. But obviously, police caught and apprehended him. Susie identified him easily, and police found the gun in his car. He was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, but claimed again that he was innocent. Robert tried to claim that the reason that his car was at Susie's house because he was driving, he felt lightheaded, so he just parked in some random person's house and went for a walk, and then he blacked out. He said it was possible that he did that to Susie while he was blacked out, but he didn't remember. Okay, whatever. Robert was released from jail while awaiting trial. For some reason I don't understand. He did. His lawyer argued that he was a successful man that had a family and a home. So he was released, waiting his trial. However, while awaiting trial, Robert did the same thing again. 18-year-old Patty Roberts was on her way to a cafe when Robert stopped her and asked her out on a date. Patty said no, so naturally, Robert then pulled out a gun and forced her into his car. He drove her to a hotel where he assaulted her and then drove her out to the woods to a secluded area. Robert did plan on killing Patty, but Patty convinced Robert that she wouldn't tell anyone what he had done to her. Robert went through Patty's wallet. He wrote down her address and information. He told her that if she went to the police, he would come for her and her family. He then dropped her off at the cafe. Surprisingly, at first, Patty didn't tell anyone of the assault. But Patty would later read in the news about a woman frozen to death in a ravine, and she started to think that this man could be connected to it. Patty went to the police and reported the incident. The police took Patty back to the motel that Robert had taken her to, and the hotel receptionist was able to confirm Robert's identity. Robert was arrested, and when Robert was arrested, police found a slip of paper in his pocket that had Patty's information written on it. He claimed that he didn't know what it was or how it got there.
He's really bad at lying.
Yeah, very.
He's just using amnesia basically for all of his excuses.
Yeah. Police had this slip of paper and they put it in the evidence file. And then I guess another police officer like comes into the room and he is in jail at this time. Robert's in jail. A police officer comes and checks on Robert, and Robert is like, hey, that little slip of paper that's right there, I need that. That has the name and telephone number of someone who's supposed to come bail me out. And that officer, not knowing what it is, hands it to him. And then it's gone.
Did he eat it?
Probably. He probably ate it. So the trial was determinative on Patty's testimony and all of Robert's character witnesses who testified that Robert was such a good guy. Robert ended up taking a deal where he would plead no contest to the kidnapping charges of Susie, and then they would drop the rape and kidnapping of Patty. Basically, all he has to plead to is kidnapping, and then they're going to drop the rape and kidnapping of a whole nother victim.
Can we also talk about no contest? I personally think it's such bullshit of a thing to even exist. Like it should be guilty or not guilty. You know, like there shouldn't be a happy medium where you're like, I'm not guilty, but I accept that you're charging me with this.
Yeah. No, it's weird. I don't even understand why it exists, but
I don't either.
Robert would obviously take this deal because it was a hell of a deal. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but after only 3 months, he was eligible for parole and work release.
This is all fucked up.
So fucked up. I'm going to go over the missing girls that are in Anchorage right now. There is one in 1975 named Megan Ermrich. She's 17, disappeared in Anchorage. Mary Thrill, age 23, disappeared in Anchorage. 1980, the body of a young woman was discovered in a gravel pit near a road called Ekulta Road. And because of the state of decomposition, police were unable to determine who the girl was, so they referred to her as Ekulta Annie. That year, later, the body of Joanne Messina was found in the same gravel pit. Then Roxanne Eastland, age 24, was missing in Anchorage. And Lisa Frutrell, age 41, last seen in Anchorage. Andrea Alteri, age 22. Sue Ann Luna, age 23, and Celia Beth Benzantian was missing December 23rd, and police would find a body that matched this description. So in between these missing girls, January 1981, Robert and Darla would open up their own bakery called Hansen's Bakery, and they would have their second child, a son. Going through a few cases where they found the bodies, Celia Van Danzent to begin with. A woman's body was found frozen to death, and Celia was last seen hitchhiking a ride to a convenience store when she went missing. Her body would be found naked with her hands tied behind her back and her chest cut open. After the autopsy and investigation, it was discovered that Celia had survived a fall into a ravine, and even with her hands tied and her chest cut open, she had managed to crawl about 20 feet up the ravine, but ended up freezing to death. And this case would go unsolved for a while. September 1982, off-duty police officers were moose hunting. And while searching for a place to hunt, they came across some soil that looked like it had been recently disturbed and dug up. It looked like a grave. They dug just a little bit and soon realized that it was definitely a shallow grave. They found a female body. The woman was clothed and had been shot in the chest. In the grave with her, police found a shell of a bullet. She also had a big bandage covering her eyes, and police assumed that this was being used as a blindfold. After an autopsy, it was suspected that the woman's body had been there since spring of that year and had been frozen. The remains would be identified as Sherry Morrow, a cold case, and Sherry was a topless dancer. And then there was Paula Goulding. The body of Paula Goulding was found September 1983. So with all of this information that they now know, they try to get a search warrant, which for whatever reason, the DEA does not agree, and they deny a search warrant 2 times, which was very surprising. So they get the help of the FBI, and the FBI assesses the victims and the crimes, and they come up with a profile. They speculated that the suspect was around 40 years old. He was married to a religious woman. The suspect would kill for the thrill of killing. And the man is an upstanding and respected member of his community. He was rejected as a youth, and he is most likely above average intelligence. He has been involved in arson or shoplifting at one time in his life. They say that he may have a stutter. He likes guns, and the suspect keeps a murder kit and mementos from his victims.
Okay, ding, ding, ding. We know exactly Like, we know a man
I mean, that is crazy, is it
like
not?
spot on. Also, what do they got put religion in? He's married to a religious woman. How did
Right?
they even figure that stuff out? You know, like that makes no sense to me.
Listen, guys, I'm currently rewatching Criminal Minds, and this makes my heart very happy.
That's so crazy. So during this time, the FBI told the flight tower to start monitoring Robert's flights, but Robert actually takes off his tail number and repaints it like really, really small so the tower like can't read it. And when he was taking off, he wouldn't radio in and tell them that he was leaving. So they really had no way to track his plane. So that really didn't work. But they end up getting a search warrant, and 1983, the police go and search Robert's house. Police arrive and knock on the door where Robert's wife, Darla, his two kids, and Robert's mother, who was in town visiting, were there. Police end up asking Darla to come to the station for questioning that night. Police can tell that Darla knew nothing about what was going on. Robert had kept everything from her. They bring Robert in. Robert, of course, completely denies killing anyone. And when police asked Robert about all the accusations, sexually assaulting and kidnapping these women, Robert doesn't deny that he had encounters with all these women, but just denies that he ever kidnapped or assaulted them. Of course, he claims it was a misunderstanding, that he did hire the women, but that everything was consensual. Whatever. He says that in most of the cases of these women, they had quoted him a price. And then after giving him what he wanted, the girls would suddenly demand more. And after Robert said that he would not pay the extra money, all the girls just like went and reported it as a rape and kidnapping. It would be a huge coincidence that all of the women that I described did the exact same thing, but okay.
Yeah. This sounds like a man who doesn't give a shit about women.
Yeah.
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back at Robert's house, police are finding some very interesting things. Police dig through every inch of his attic, where they find buried in insulation a stash of guns, including a .357 Magnum that Cindy had described in excruciating detail. They also find a map behind Robert's headboard, and they open the map, and it's like an aviation map, and it has X's on it. It has 21 X's. And they start backtracking where these X's are at, and the X's mark the exact location of where the women's bodies were found, of all the unsolved cases that I just went through, all the missing people that I just went through.
So he kept a map.
He had a map where he kept track of where he left all of his victims.
That's really smart of him to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad he did, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, are the police going to believe that? He's going to be like, it's a map of
Treasure.
cigarettes. Yeah.
We haven't found 21 bodies yet. So there's all these things that the police have to go back and check. Obviously, this suggests there's more victims. All of this is more than enough to place Robert under the arrest for first-degree assault, kidnapping, firearm charges, theft, and insurance fraud. And the insurance fraud comes from the search of his house, where police stumbled upon like all these hunting trophies that he had hidden in his house. And years previously, he had made an insurance claim that they were all stolen. And so he got this huge insurance payout of like $13,000 from his insurance company, which he used to start his bakery. Yeah, they're not charging him for murder yet, but all of these charges are enough to hold him while they start investigating this map and trying to find more bodies. After the arrest, Robert's two friends, who claimed that they were with him the day of Cindy's assault, yeah, those guys, they come forward and confess to lying that they were with Robert.
Oh, they didn't want to get in trouble.
I guess that Robert had asked them to lie for him, and they agreed, but now they realize how serious it is and that Robert has been arrested. And they tell the truth. They said that Robert came to them and told them that he was with a prostitute the night that Cindy alleged that the assault happened, and he didn't want anyone to find out, like his family and stuff. So he just asked them to lie. So no more alibi for Robert. Police find that in the bag of jewelry, there is a piece that belongs to many of the missing women. Police also test bullets that they found at the crime scenes, and they match the gun that they found in Robert's attic. February 1984, before police can even charge Robert with a murder, Robert's attorney calls the police to tell them that Robert is ready to talk. Robert tells police that Cindy is telling the truth. Robert says that he took Cindy to his house, where he chained her to a support beam in his basement and held her at gunpoint while he assaulted her. After Cindy escaped, Robert raced back home and cleaned everything up. He knew that Cindy had seen his face, his truck, his home. Inside of his home, she knew about everything. Robert confesses to 17 more murders. Mostly they were young girls in their 20s who were passing through Anchorage. They were topless dancers or sex workers. He would find women, request their services, and he would find a way to get them in his car. He would then drive them somewhere where he would assault them. He would then promise to let them go after they took a trip to his cabin in his plane. But Robert didn't have a cabin, so he would get them in the plane and he would fly them to an even more remote spot. Sometimes he would fly them to an abandoned cabin and break into the abandoned cabin where he would trap them inside and assault them there. He would then allow his victims to run away, and then he would hunt them.
Whenever you said one of his passions growing up, because he had no friends, was hunting, I was like, dear God, this is going to come into play.
Yeah.
I immediately thought that.
Yeah. He was a prize-winning marksman. It was his talent. So he would let these women start running and hiding, and then he would hunt them like animals. He would hunt them for hours, sometimes days, until he located them in their hiding spots, and he would shoot them. They know this because, well, Robert, I think he said so, but also most of the victims were found shot in the back, so they knew that they were running. Robert tells police that he committed these crimes because he felt rejected all of his life, especially when he was young. Robert says this is because he had acne and a stutter. He felt like when he kidnapped and assaulted women, he finally had some kind of control. In Robert's mind, these sex workers were not women. We know that Robert has kids and he has a wife, so he respected like some women in his life, but he saw like good women and bad women, and these bad women, he saw them as expendable, and he would target only the bad women. Police found 17 victims, but believe that he is responsible for many more, possibly 21, like the X's on the map. Police used the map and searched heavily over the spots in Alaska and even took Robert out on the searches to show him the grave sites of the women that he killed. Like I said in the beginning, like y'all didn't know his name. He's not as popular as Bundy or Gacy, but he had a huge amount of victims. And this is because part of Robert's deal that he ends up making with the state was to limit publicity around his case. So I don't know how they did that in the 80s, but I don't know if that meant like not publishing it in the newspaper, not talking about the trial. I'm not sure, but that explains a lot of the reason why he's not as popular as a lot of the serial killers that we talk about. He ended up pleading guilty to only 4 murders, and these were the 4 murders that the police had the most evidence against him for. But he admitted to police of committing 13 more and at least 30 sexual assaults. The DA did not bring formal charges against him for those. The judge ultimately sentenced him to 461 years in prison plus life. He served this in a federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania until he ended up coming back to Alaska to serve the rest of his time at Lehman Creek Correctional Facility. And that is until the correctional officers found an escape plan in his cell. He was then transferred to Spring Creek Facility in Alaska, where he served the rest of his sentence. Thankfully, his wife, Darla, filed for divorce, and she and her 2 children left Alaska to escape the harassment that they faced in the case after it became public. They then moved back to Arkansas, where Darla was originally from.
Ding, ding, ding.
Robert Hansen died at 75 years old in 2014. It is said that when he died, he took with him more details of his crimes and his victims, like their names and locations. Police believe that there are many more victims of Robert Hansen. But that is the story of the Alaskan serial killer, Robert Hansen.
Good
What a
job.
monster.
Snaps. Before people like shit on the fact that he got 400 and something years as a sentencing, I just want to put this out there because this was a fun fact that I learned a little while ago, that Alaska and Hawaii are the 2 only United States that never even had the death penalty ever. Like it was never an option for them. So they're the only 2 states that's never had it. So
That's crazy. I
guess-
didn't know that.
glad he died in prison. Really sad we don't know about the rest of the victims. I assume there's a ton.
Yeah. I think the reason that he only got charged with 4, they charged him with the most
Evidence.
the victims that they had the most information against.
Yeah.
But when these sex workers were going missing, they weren't collecting evidence on them. They weren't investigating their disappearances. So really, by the time that they caught him, they didn't have very much information to charge him with.
Well, who knew? I mean, who even knows how many sex workers or prostitutions or whatever that they have gone missing in general. You know, like that's such a thing that, like you said earlier, their families don't even know where
Yeah.
they are. They could be missing, they could be dead, they could just not want to be found. And also,
Yeah.
Alaska is a scary
Yeah.
And
for
also,
murder.
like he could have victims in the other states he lived in before he even got to Alaska.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, it got a little shaky with like the names and victims at the end of my story because there's just really not that much information about timelines and, when he killed this person or when they even went missing. They didn't even track when they went missing. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 17 victims confirmed. I think it's confirmed 21, but, All right. And with that, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. If you want even more information, including photos of the case, you can check out our blog, overmydeadpod.com. Be sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening to this and check us out on social media at Over My Dead Pod. And we will see you next week with another case. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.